Welcome to Marketing Monday. Today's topic, the 3 lines theory of marketing. Let me give you some background. Let me give you some context. 3 weeks ago, I decided to expand my professional career. And so I signed up for what is known as a brand strategy sprint, a 3-week intensive version of the senior level MBA brand strategy course at NYU Stern. Now, if you'll know, I spend my work hours working. I spend my after work hours streaming or grinding Hollow Knight. God! So it actually did not leave me a lot of time to study for this class. In order to help myself learn the material for an upcoming final project, I'm going to teach it to you. Now, I want to give full credit to Section 4, the education company that created this. These concepts are originally from them. I'm reteaching them in my own words and with my own examples and stuff, but it is essentially their stuff. And if any of you become marketing professionals, be sure to check them out. When you hear the word branding, as a marketer or someone who's gonna have a business or even think about your own personal brand, you should think about the word margin. Brand should just be a fancy word for the word margin, okay? So let me start with the 3 lines and then we'll explain what that is. Line 1. The red line, cost. Line 2, price. The final line, this is the most important line for a marketer, is perceived value, which has to be above price. And these 3 lines explain all aspects of marketing. Now, the difference between cost and price is called margin, okay? That's how much you make. What's important about the 3 lines theory is that the lines can never cross. Price can never go above this. If the perceived value is what the customer thinks of your product. Customers will only buy something if they think they're getting more value than what it costs. Now let's say my margin right now, let's say it's 50 cents and this is $1. Okay? So I'm making 50 cents right here. I'll make a box for you. This is my juicy margin box. All right? I want it to be bigger. Well, if perceived value is right here, I can't because I can't raise prices. I don't have any room. So your goal as a marketer is to raise this. The higher you get this, the higher you can raise this. And then you can get fat margins, okay? Now, the second part of this is market share. The difference between price and perceived value, and that means more people are buying. It's about the number of people buying it, okay? If you want a huge market share, you can raise your perceived value really high and keep prices low, okay? For example, think about Netflix. Perfect example. Netflix could charge more. They would get fewer customers, but probably make more money. They'd have a bigger margin. They don't because they want a bigger market share. They want a lot of people using it. Either way, you either get a lot of people using it or you get a lot of margin, which is a lot of money. Those are your 2 options. So your marketer's goal is people think they're getting more. That is the crux of brand. That is the essential story of brand. We could just watch this movie, or we can go more in depth on the brands. I'm going to do Ford versus Ferrari to explain the difference in strategies with perceived value with the 3 lines. In 2019, Ford sold 5.4 million cars. Ferrari sold about 10,000. Actually, about like 7,000 or 8,000 cars. That's it in the whole year. And you'd think, wow, one company is just significantly doing better than the other. There's just no other way to slice it. But margin-wise, Ford takes about $8,000 to $10,000 of plastic and steel and computer parts and makes a car and sells it for about 8% more than it costs to make. Ferrari, 52%, 6 times more gross margin, okay? So Ferrari makes a fat chunk of cash on every car sold. And that's all from the brand. That is purely from the brand. It costs them, a certain amount of money to make the car and they sell it for a lot more than it costs to make. So they have a gigantic margin, but pretty low market share. Few cars sold, but a huge amount of price. While Ford, they have a lot amount of cars sold, huge market share, but very little margin, okay? But in the end, they're both trying to raise this perceived value so they can increase their strategy. There's 2 different strategies. Ford's goal is to raise that blue line through advertising. That's why they spend the most of any car maker. Ford spent $3.6 billion on advertising. That's way more than Mercedes-Benz, and Ferrari and Tesla spent zero, okay? The average age of their buyer is 41 years old, relatively young for a car buyer, and has an average salary of about $80,000, okay? Ford is targeting essentially the everyman. They spend a ton of money on ads, and that is why they are the official truck of the NFL. They spend about $40 million a year to be the official truck of the NFL. That's why you see so many goddamn truck commercials during the NFL, because it targets this guy exactly. The 41-year-old, middle-of-the-road American, all right? That's what they're going for.
Get great deals on Ford F-Series, America's best-selling trucks for 43 years.
Like a total savings of $12,691 on the Built Ford Tough F-150. Only.
Now look at this. This is exactly what we're talking about. Their strategy is one of the original, the easiest, most basic, but core marketing strategies. And the idea of more for less. The idea is literally to show you how much you're getting at an affordable price. That is entirely different from how Ferrari raises their blue line, raises their perceived value. Ferrari literally limits car sales. This is an actual article that I found. Ferrari actually on purpose stopped selling cars so they can have high perceived value. If they get too many, Connor said, some dude sat in a boardroom and said, let's say it's truck month, and it worked. It did. Whoever came up with truck month is actually a genius. Truck month isn't even a consistent month. You're right. They just do truck month whenever they need to sell more trucks. Technically, all months at Ford are truck month because they sell trucks every month. But Ferrari does not do that. Ferrari limits their sales. They try to keep a few amount of cars going out because if there's too many Ferraris, if their market share gets too big, they lose the exclusive value of their brand, they lose their perceived value, and they can't charge as high prices. If everyone's got a Ferrari, then you're not going to pay a huge amount of money for it. This is the strategy behind things like drops, exclusive sneakers, NFTs, a lot of things. A lot of things in the modern day economy are using the strategy of scarcity to get artificially increase their perceived value. Human beings generally think that things that are scarce are worthwhile. And so you can spend a lot less on advertising. In fact, I don't know if you saw on this, Ferrari spends nothing. Now, this is on TV ads. Ferrari spends money on like Formula One sponsorships and major race influencers and designing custom supercars that can be showed off at auto shows. But they spend no money on TV ads at all. Ferrari spends zero. Ferrari goes for high-end, high-performance, luxury, Italian, foreign, limited vehicles, and it shows in the amount of dealerships. So look at this. This is number of dealerships. For every Ferrari dealership, there is 100 Ford dealerships, and they attract a different buyer. So I mentioned that this is the average age of Ford users. Does anyone want to guess what the average age of a Ferrari user is? Who do you think is buying this car? The answer is a 51-year-old millionaire. Ferrari, despite a brand that it seems to appeal to the youth and have luxury, is mostly bought by people with midlife crises who have a lot of money. The average Ferrari owner owns 5 other cars. That's a crazy stat. Ford does advertising, gets this number up. Once they get this number up, they do not raise price. And if you have a big market share here, you can do something called economies of scale. This is one of your benefits. So if you're making a gazillion cars, you can use large factories to lower your costs. You can lower your cost. And that way, you're getting margin too. So now they're making a little bit more money and they're selling a ton of cars. That's how Ford does it, okay? Ferrari, on the other hand, they raise their perceived value super high and then they raise their price right up on the ass of that. So they just get a ton of money per car. It's not as big of a business, but it creates them a ton of money for significantly less work. They don't have to have so many employees. They don't have to have so many factories. The risk is lower. As long as they keep the brand value high, they just make an absolute rack load of money per car. And if you look around at any brand you'll see in your life, you can start to see how they all tackle this problem in different ways. A great example of a company that is the best in the world is Apple, because Apple has an incredibly low cost product. They have raised the perceived value so high. Let me see if I can do this. That they get both. They get the sales numbers of Ford and the margin of Ferrari. They make as much money per phone as like a Ferrari would on their car in percentage wise, but they sell as many phones as a Ford would sell cars. It is unique. There's no product like the iPhone that sells as many as it does and still has the high perceived value. How do monopolies sustain themselves against companies with lower prices? So for example, you're thinking of maybe Uber or Microsoft right now with Xbox Game Pass, where they price it underneath what it costs to make. What Uber does is they get a bunch of investor money. So rich people invest billions into Uber, and then Uber spends that money on offering things under their cost. Let's be honest. Here's the truth of the matter. The average person did not have the ability to have a private chauffeur anywhere they wanted to go. Okay? And now suddenly, since 2014, we have. The reason for that is because it's artificially lowered. It's not going to last forever. And you've already seen it. Uber prices have been going up a lot recently because they're burning money. It can't be sold for that cheaply. But they wanted market share. They want everyone to know their name, and it worked. They got a big brand. And the plan is, once you get everyone hooked on Uber, you raise the price back up. You've killed taxis. A lot of cities don't even have taxi service anymore. You've killed all the competition, and then that's how you do. You outlast your competition. You lower the price, outlast competition, and then raise price. That is the monopoly strategy. What the really scary monopolies like Amazon do is they keep these prices low so you never suspect them of being a monopoly. Like in the 1920s or 30s, they would do this. They would lower the price, drive competitors out of business, and then raise them back up, and everyone would get pissed. What Amazon does is they lower the prices, they keep them low, and then they just use their dominant market share to win other things. So for example, they want to win versus Netflix. They can now use the fact that Amazon is the biggest shopping service in the world to bundle it with Prime to make Prime Video bigger. Plenty of people in this chat would see a Gucci belt at like $100 and be like, what the fuck? Why the fuck would I pay that much money for a belt? Because for you, the perceived value is lower than that price. For some people, that's like, oh, $100 for a Gucci belt, that's a deal. But for the same people, you might be like, oh my God, a new Valorant skin for only $20? What a fucking deal. I'll never buy Gucci, but I'll buy this fucking knife skin. Okay? You all fall for the same tricks. You have different preferences, okay? What's especially amazing about digital goods is the cost is almost nothing. The cost is so far down here. So if they can price it like at $20, if they can get the blue line up to where you think that's worth something, they are making racks. And again, this applies to every company. If you think about every company, you can figure out what is their strategy? Where is their lines at, what they're trying to do? It's a great way to think about marketing in general. And I hope that this breakdown has opened some thoughts for you and helped you think about it. My final example is when you go too far with that is MoviePass, all right? So MoviePass had a pretty decent perceived value. It cost an absolute fuck ton to make, probably right up here. And they priced it way down here. They priced it so much lower than what you were getting, than what it cost them. They were essentially giving you free movie tickets for $10 a month. You could watch as many movies as you want. And all they were doing is buying those tickets from the movie theater and giving them to you. It was an amazing deal. And that's why they were able to attract a ton of customers in no time. They did almost no marketing. But of course, that doesn't work for very long. They were losing so much money on each movie that the weekend that the Mission Impossible 3 came out, Mission Impossible Fallout, whenever that movie came out, whenever Fallout came out, so many people went to go see it that it bankrupted the company. The best thing you can do to grow whatever you're trying to do is raise this. So I think I've covered it. I hope this helped. This to me is a fascinating subject. I know it's actually one of my most intense marketing streams. Not too many jokes, but I think it's a good framework. And now I can use that to build off a lot of things I want to talk about.